Commander Zixrel had seen many things during his 43 years of military service. He had witnessed entire fleets burn in the void of space. He had survived the siege of Korath Prime, where 70,000 soldiers perished in 6 hours. He had even attended a mandatory sensitivity training seminar that lasted 4 excruciating days. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for the disaster currently displayed on his holographic screen. The admission roster for the Calathian War Academy glowed before him, listing 217 new recruits. 216 of them made perfect sense. Warriors from across the galaxy, battle-hardened candidates who had already survived preliminary trials that would make most sapient beings weep, species specifically bred for combat, the usual collection of homicidal overachievers who thought mortality rates were more like suggestions than actual statistics. Then there was entry number 217, Jessica Park, human, female, origin planet Earth. Previous experience debate team captain, volunteer tutor, and apparently something called a barista, which Zixrel's translator unhelpfully defined as one who creates beverages. Her application essay, if you could call it that, discussed conflict resolution strategies and the importance of cross-cultural communication in maintaining galactic peace. Zixrel's 3 eye stalks bent at angles that would have made a geometry teacher proud, all of them focused on different parts of the screen as if hoping one of them would see different information. They did not. The file remained stubbornly consistent in its wrongness. He pulled up the transfer request. There it was, clear as the vacuum of space. Someone in the Galactic Administration Bureau had confused the Diplomatic Corps Training Center with the Calathian War Academy Death Corps Division. The abbreviations were similar, sure, DIPCTC and DCDKWA. If you were illiterate, blind, and possibly suffering from a severe head injury, you might confuse them. Might. The Calathian War Academy was not a place where mistakes survived. It was not a place where much of anything survived, actually. The Academy had an 87% mortality rate during training. 87%. That meant if you walked in with 100 classmates, 13 of you would walk out. Maybe. If it was a good year. The Academy's motto, roughly translated, meant, "Those who endure become legends. The rest become cautionary tales." This human female was supposed to be learning proper napkin folding techniques for state dinners, not how to disarm a Krellian shock trooper with nothing but a piece of rebar and pure spite. Zixrel summoned her immediately. He would simply explain the error, apologize profusely on behalf of the administration, and personally arrange her transfer to the correct facility. She would probably cry with relief, perhaps thank him for saving her life. This would be simple. Jessica Park entered his office 7 minutes later, carrying a standard-issue duffel bag and wearing an expression of polite curiosity that seemed wildly inappropriate given her surroundings. She was small by human standards, maybe 1.6 meters tall, with dark hair pulled back in something his cultural database called a ponytail. She looked like she was arriving for a mildly interesting field trip, not the galaxy's most lethal military institution. Cadet Park, Zixrel began, trying to sound both authoritative and gentle, which was difficult when you had a voice that naturally sounded like grinding gravel. There has been a significant administrative error. You were assigned to this facility incorrectly. You should be attending the Diplomatic Corps Training Center, not the Calathian War Academy. I am truly sorry for this confusion, but I can have you transferred within the hour, and we will cover all relocation costs naturally. They waited for the relief, the tears, the profuse gratitude. Jessica Park blinked once, then twice. Then she did something that would haunt Zixrel's nightmares for years to come. She laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not a hysterical laugh. A genuine amused, well, isn't this silly kind of laugh that suggested she had just been told about a minor scheduling mix-up, not a potentially fatal bureaucratic disaster. "Oh wow," she said, shaking her head with a grin that Zixrel's threat assessment training immediately classified as dangerously unaware of danger. "That is so typical. I was wondering why the acceptance packet included a section on acceptable last words and next of kin notification procedures. I just figured you folks were really thorough with your paperwork." Zixrel's central eye stalk did a complete rotation, a physiological response usually reserved for witnessing something completely incomprehensible. "You read those sections and still came." "Well, yeah," Jessica said, shrugging in that peculiar human gesture that could mean anything from "I suppose" to "I have accepted my doom" with casual indifference. "I mean, I thought it was weird, but Earth's military academies have pretty intense training too. Figured it was just a cultural thing." "Cadet Park," Zixral said slowly, desperately trying to make her understand. "This facility has an 87% fatality rate during training. That means most beings who enter do not leave alive." "Yikes," Jessica said, and her tone suggested she had just learned about a moderately inconvenient traffic pattern, not mass casualties. "That does sound pretty intense. So you will accept the transfer, yes?" Jessica tilted her head. Considering this, Zixral felt hope rising. This would be fine. She would leave. He would file the incident report. Everything would return to normal. "Well," Jessica said thoughtfully, "I'm already here. My stuff's unpacked. I met a few other cadets in the hallway. They seem nice. Plus, my scholarship only covers this semester, and if I transfer now I'd have to reapply for next term's funding, which is a whole thing." She smiled brightly. "Might as well see what happens, right?" Zixral's 3 eye stalks drooped simultaneously, a physical expression of his soul briefly exiting his body in pure disbelief. This human female, this debate team champion beverage creator, had just been informed she was attending the galaxy's deadliest military academy by mistake, and her response was essentially "sounds inconvenient to leave now." "Might as well see what happens," Zixral repeated faintly. "Exactly," Jessica said cheerfully. "Where do I pick up my training schedule?" Commander Zixral, veteran of countless battles and survivor of administrative nightmares beyond counting, did the only thing he could do. He pointed toward the Cadet Processing Center and began drafting what he assumed would be a very short personnel file. He had no idea he was about to document the most confusing 4 months of his entire military career. The orientation amphitheater could hold 5,000 spectators, though today it only contained 217 terrified cadets and a teaching staff that looked like they enjoyed watching suffering a bit too much. Jessica found herself standing between a 7-foot-tall reptilian creature whose scales kept shifting colors based on his anxiety levels, currently a nauseating shade of yellow-green, and something that looked like a floating collection of tentacles with too many eyes. Both of them were visibly sweating. Well, the reptilian was sweating. The tentacle being was secreting some kind of mucus. Same general concept. Weapons Master Thrungle stood at the center of the arena floor, all 4 of his massive arms crossed over a chest that looked like it had been carved from solid granite and then hit repeatedly with ugly sticks until it achieved its current terrifying appearance. His species, the Gorath, were known throughout the galaxy for 2 things: incredible strength and absolutely zero sense of humor. "Welcome, cadets," Thrungle rumbled, his voice like an avalanche having a bad day. "You are here because you believe you are warriors. You are wrong. You are here because you might possibly maybe become warriors. If you survive, which most of you will not." He paused, letting that sink in. Several cadets whimpered. The tentacle being next to Jessica started vibrating. "The Calathian War Academy does not coddle. We do not nurture. We do not participate in the soft weakness of modern military training where everyone gets a participation trophy and positive affirmations." Thrungle's voice dripped with contempt. "We throw you into fire and see who crawls out. Our first lesson begins now." He clapped 2 of his 4 hands together, and the arena floor split open. 217 combat drones rose from below, hovering in perfect formation. Each drone was roughly the size of a large dog, bristling with weapons that ranged from stun batons to plasma cutters to what looked suspiciously like actual chainsaws, because apparently someone had decided that combat drones needed chainsaws. "For reasons. Each of you will face 1 drone," Thrungle announced with what might have been a smile, if smiles were supposed to be absolutely horrifying. "Defeat it using any means necessary. Medical teams are standing by. Begin." The arena exploded into absolute madness. Drones shot forward, weapons active, targeting the nearest cadets with prejudice. The reptilian next to Jessica shrieked and ran, his scales flashing through every color of panic simultaneously. The tentacle being wrapped itself into a defensive ball and started rolling away at surprising speed. All around the arena, cadets were dodging, screaming, fighting, and in several cases, getting immediately stunned into unconsciousness by drones that had clearly been programmed by someone who thought gentle introduction meant only severely injure them. Within 3 minutes half the class was down, stunned, shocked, sliced by glancing blows or simply cowering in corners, while drones circled like mechanical sharks. The medical teams were already busy. Jessica, meanwhile, stood perfectly still, watching her assigned drone hover approximately 10 feet away. It seemed confused by her lack of movement. Its weapon array, a delightful combination of shock prods and spinning blades, rotated through ready positions as its targeting sensors tried to determine why this small human was not running or screaming or doing anything except staring at it with mild interest. She tilted her head, studying its movement pattern. The drone shifted left, then right, then left again. Then it would dart forward, weapons extending before pulling back. Left, lunge, left, right, left, lunge. It was following a basic aggression algorithm, trying to intimidate before attacking, predictable. Jessica glanced around the arena, spotted a maintenance area near the wall, jogged toward it calmly while her drone followed, still confused by her non-panic demeanor. Grabbed a trash bin lid that some poor janitor had left behind. Also grabbed a mop handle from a nearby cleaning station. "Okay then," she said to the drone, which somehow seemed even more confused that she was talking to it. "Let's do this, I guess." The drone lunged. Left, lunge, exactly as predicted. Jessica sidestepped, brought the trash bin lid up to deflect the shock prods, then jammed the mop handle directly into the drone's primary rotor housing. The drone made a sound like a cat being stuffed into a blender, spun wildly out of control, and crashed into the arena floor where it proceeded to have what could only be described as a mechanical seizure before powering down completely. Silence spread across the arena like spilled liquid. Fighting stopped. Cadets who were still conscious turned to stare. The teaching staff, positioned in observation boxes above the arena, leaned forward in collective disbelief. Jessica looked down at the twitching drone, then up at Weapons Master Thrungle and shrugged. "Is that it? Or does it have a second round or something?" Thrungle's 4 arms slowly uncrossed. All 4 of his eyes focused on this small human female who had just defeated a military-grade combat drone, using garbage and cleaning supplies while the rest of the class was getting destroyed by superior weaponry and training. "How?" he said, and his voice suggested he was having some kind of internal crisis. "Did you know to do that?" Jessica looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Oh, that. I have 3 younger brothers back home, Tommy, Jake, and Marcus. You learn to improvise when you're constantly dealing with surprise attacks, limited resources, and opponents who have no concept of fair play or proper boundaries." She smiled pleasantly. Also, the drone had an obvious movement pattern, left, lunge. Once you see the pattern, you just work around it. My brother Jake does the same thing when he's trying to steal food off my plate. Very predictable. In the observation box, Assistant Instructor Velikara turned to Thrungle's second-in-command. "Did she just compare our advanced combat drones to human siblings?" "I believe she did," the second-in-command replied faintly. "And she defeated it using trash." "Affirmative." "I need to sit down," Velikara said, despite already sitting. Down in the arena, Thrungle was experiencing what his species called a comprehension collapse, which was the Gorith equivalent of a mental blue screen of death. His entire teaching philosophy, built on decades of military experience and Gorith warrior tradition, had just been compared to dealing with small human males fighting over food. "Your brothers," he said slowly. "Yep," Jessica confirmed cheerfully. "Taught you combat tactics." "Well, survival tactics, mostly. There's a difference between winning a fight and just making it to dinner without someone putting a frog in your backpack. Though I guess the principles are similar." Somewhere in the observation deck, 3 instructors were having quiet breakdowns. One of them was rocking back and forth, muttering about training protocols. Another was recalculating threat assessments for Earth origin species. The third was simply staring into the distance, questioning every life choice that had led to this moment. Weapons Master Thrungle looked at the destroyed drone, then at Jessica, then at the rest of the class where cadets were still being peeled off the floor by medical teams. "Class dismissed," he announced. "Except you, Cadet Park. We need to discuss your file." Jessica picked up her trash bin lid and mop handle, presumably to return them to their proper locations, because apparently even in a death arena she was concerned about tidiness, and followed Thrungal out of the amphitheater. Behind her, 216 cadets and an entire teaching staff tried to process what they had just witnessed. They failed mostly. The moon of Krath 7 was, by all objective measurements, a horrible place to exist. Its atmosphere was technically breathable, but tasted like burning rubber mixed with regret. The temperature swung 40 degrees between day and night cycles. The local wildlife consisted primarily of things with too many teeth and aggressive attitudes. The plant life ranged from mildly poisonous to will dissolve your internal organs if you look at it wrong. It was, in other words, perfect for a survival training exercise designed to separate the capable from the soon-to-be dead. Instructor Vekthara watched from the orbital monitoring station as 217 cadets were dropped across a 50-kilometer radius, each one deposited alone with nothing but a basic survival kit and a locator beacon for emergency extraction. The rules were simple. Survive for 72 hours using only what you could find, build, or catch. No communication devices, no ration packs, no help, every alien for themselves. This was the test that typically reduced class sizes by another 15 to 20% through a combination of injuries, complete psychological breakdowns, and occasionally death despite the monitoring system's best efforts. The first 6 hours went exactly as expected. Cadets scattered across the hostile terrain, searching for water sources, shelter locations, and anything edible. Some succeeded. Most failed spectacularly. Vekthara's screens showed the usual chaos: cadets eating poisonous plants and requiring emergency extraction, cadets building shelters that immediately collapsed, cadets trying to fight local predators with sticks and optimism, which never ended well. Then there was Cadet Park's signal. Vekthara pulled up her monitoring feed and immediately experienced confusion. Jessica had landed in a particularly nasty section of rocky terrain near a sulfur swamp, possibly the worst starting position of anyone in the class. She should be struggling. Instead, her vital signs showed she was calm, and her location beacon indicated she was moving with purpose towards something. No, wait, not something. Someone. Vekthara watched in growing bewilderment as Jessica approached another cadet, the reptilian named Slicks, who had spent orientation turning various shades of panic. Slicks was currently huddled under an overhang, his scales a miserable gray color, clearly having no idea what to do next. The monitoring station could pick up audio if Vekthara focused the satellite feeds. She did so now, wondering what possible reason Cadet Park had for violating the isolation protocol. Hey, Jessica's voice came through, friendly and completely unsuited to a hostile alien moon. You doing okay there? Slicks's scales flashed surprised orange. This is solo survival training. We are not supposed to interact. Yeah, but that seems kind of inefficient, Jessica said, crouching down next to him. You're clearly freaking out. No offense. I'm doing fine. Why don't we work together? I know the rules say every alien for themselves, but the rules also don't specifically forbid cooperation, right? They just say survive for 72 hours. Vekthara pulled up the exercise guidelines. Read them twice. Jessica was technically correct. The instructions said survive alone. They did not explicitly forbid cadets from finding each other and cooperating. It had simply never occurred to anyone that cadets would want to help potential rivals. I do not understand, Slick said, echoing Vekthara's own thoughts. Why would you help me? We are competing for class ranking. Are we though? Jessica asked. I thought we were just trying to not die on a horrible moon for 3 days. Come on. I found a cave system about half a kilometer east. Good shelter, defensible position, near a water source that doesn't smell like Satan's gym socks. I'm going to check on a few more people, get a group together. A group, Slicks repeated faintly. Yeah, like a team, safety in numbers and all that. Then she left, jogging off toward the next nearest cadet beacon, leaving Slicks staring after her in complete confusion. Vekthara switched feeds, following Jessica's progress. Over the next 4 hours, the human female collected struggling cadets like some kind of deranged shepherd gathering lost sheep. The tentacle being from orientation, whose name was apparently Quilks. A stone-skinned Theron named Grix, who had badly injured her leg falling into a ravine. A young Centaurian called Pax, who had been crying next to a stream, overwhelmed by the entire situation. By nightfall, Jessica had assembled a group of 12 cadets, all of whom should have been suffering alone but were instead gathered in a cave system, organized into something that looked suspiciously like a functional community. This is not protocol. Vecthara muttered, watching her screens with growing disbelief. Jessica, apparently operating on some kind of human social programming that overrode basic military training concepts, had organized her collection of misfits into work teams. She taught them to build shelters using local branches and broad leaves from the less murderous plants, showed them how to dig a basic latrine system away from the water source, explaining something about bacteria and not dying of dysentery, demonstrated starting fires using friction methods when the standard fire starter in the survival kit ran out of charge. Then came the food situation. Vecthara watched in horrified fascination as Jessica approached the local plant life with the survival instinct of someone who had apparently made peace with death. "Okay," Jessica said to her assembled group, holding up a purple plant with suspicious-looking bulbs. "We need to figure out what's edible. The database is useless. Half this stuff is not even cataloged. So we're going to do this the old-fashioned way." "What is the old-fashioned way?" Quilks asked nervously, tentacles quivering. "We test small amounts and see what happens," Jessica said cheerfully. "That is insane," Grix bellowed, her stone-like skin somehow conveying absolute horror. "It's scientific methodology," Jessica corrected. "Watch. I'll try a tiny piece of this one. If I don't die or start hallucinating in the next hour, we know it's probably safe." She bit off a small piece of the purple bulb, chewed thoughtfully, and swallowed while her entire group stared in collective terror. Up in orbit, Vecthara had her emergency extraction team on standby, certain she was about to witness a poisoning. 1 hour later, Jessica was fine. The purple bulbs became an approved food source. Over the next 24 hours, Jessica systematically tested 17 different plant species using what she called the nibble method, which Vecthara's medical team confirmed was absolutely reckless and also somehow effective. She built simple traps using vines and triggers that caught small protein-rich creatures the database identified as basically space rabbits. She showed the group how to purify water using sand filtration and boiling. She organized watch schedules so everyone could sleep safely. It was not military survival training. It was summer camp with slightly higher stakes. Vecthara checked the statistics for the rest of the class. 37 cadets had already been extracted due to injuries. 14 more were in serious trouble, barely hanging on. 5 had given up and activated their emergency beacons voluntarily, accepting failure rather than continuing. Jessica's group had 0 casualties. 0 injuries beyond minor scratches. They had food, water, shelter, and what appeared to be a functional social structure complete with a duty roster and designated cooking times. Instructor Vecthara, her second-in-command, said carefully, "Cadet Park's group is singing." "They are what?" "Singing. Around the fire. I believe it is what humans call a campfire song. Something about bottles on a wall." Vecthara pulled up the audio feed. Sure enough, 12 alien cadets of various species were sitting around a fire, bellies full of space rabbit and purple bulbs, singing a repetitive human song about beverage containers while Jessica taught them the harmony parts. On the harshest moon in the sector, where cadets were supposed to be tested to their absolute limits, Jessica Park had created a functioning cooperative community, and was now leading group sing-alongs. Vecthara looked at her monitoring screens, looked at the 30% injury rate among the solo cadets, looked back at Jessica's well-fed, sheltered, harmonizing group. "I do not understand this species," Vecthara said quietly. "Should we stop them?" her second asked. "Stop them from what?" "Surviving effectively. Having 0 casualties. Teaching valuable wilderness skills." Vecthara's head tendrils drooped in defeat. "They are technically following the rules. They are surviving. They are just doing it completely wrong. Or completely right," the second-in-command suggested. Vecthara did not respond. She simply watched as Jessica Park, who was supposed to be attending diplomatic school and learning proper fork placement, taught a group of alien warriors how to make something she called friendship bracelets using plant fibers. 72 hours later, 12 cadets emerged from Krath 7 healthy, well-fed, and with significantly improved morale. They also all had matching bracelets. The teaching staff's incident report for this exercise was 11 pages long, and contained the phrase spontaneous cooperative social structure 43 times. Nobody knew what to do with it. The zero-gravity combat arena was a sphere 40 meters in diameter. Its interior surfaces padded but still unforgiving when cadets inevitably slammed into them at high velocity. Handholds dotted the walls at irregular intervals, and the entire chamber could be filled with obstacles, debris fields, or environmental hazards, depending on the training scenario. Today it was empty except for the cadets floating awkwardly near the entry ports, most of them already looking vaguely nauseated. Combat instructor Rithanel floated at the center of the sphere, her magnetic boots keeping her oriented to what she had designated as down, even though down had stopped existing the moment gravity shut off. She was a veteran of the Third Void War, where she had personally boarded 17 enemy vessels and cleared them deck by deck in zero-gravity conditions. She had approximately zero patience for cadets who could not adapt to three-dimensional combat. "Listen carefully," Rithnell barked, her voice echoing through helmet comms. "In space combat there is no up or down, no ground beneath your feet, no convenient reference points. You must think in 3 dimensions simultaneously while managing your momentum, or you will die confused and spinning helplessly. This exercise will separate those who can adapt from those who belong in ground-based positions where they can keep their feet planted like frightened children." She gestured to the arena. "The rules are simple. Full contact sparring. Incapacitation or surrender ends the match. Use the environment. Use your opponent's momentum against them. Do not vomit in your helmets because cleaning fees will be deducted from your stipends. Begin." The first matches were disasters. Cadets pushed off walls too hard and went spinning out of control. They tried to punch and ended up rotating themselves instead of their opponents due to basic physics they had apparently slept through in class. 3 cadets immediately threw up despite Rithnell's explicit warnings. 1 cadet pushed off a wall, missed their opponent entirely, and sailed across the entire arena before hitting the opposite side with a sound that made everyone wince. Rithnell watched with the expression of someone who had seen this incompetence many times before and had not yet built up immunity to the disappointment. Then came Jessica's match. Her opponent was a Draxian named Korth, built like a tank with armor plating and mass to spare. He outweighed Jessica by at least 80 kilograms. He grinned inside his helmet, clearly expecting an easy victory against the small human who kept doing inexplicable things, but surely could not overcome basic physics. "Ready positions," Rithnell announced. Korth planted himself against a wall, coiled and ready to launch like a missile. Jessica floated peacefully near the opposite wall, rotating herself slowly to keep Korth in view, looking for all the world like she was casually treading water in a pool. "Begin." Korth launched himself with tremendous force, arms extended to grapple. He shot across the arena like a cannonball, closing the distance in seconds. Jessica pushed off her wall with what looked like barely any effort, twisted her body sideways, and Korth sailed past her, missing by centimeters. She reached out as he passed, gave him the gentlest push on his shoulder, and his trajectory changed just enough that he hit the far wall at an awkward angle and bounced off spinning. "Huh," Jessica said thoughtfully. "This is like a really aggressive game of underwater tag. I was on the swim team for 2 years. This is way easier than pool wrestling, honestly." Rithnell's hand moved toward the pause button, then stopped. She needed to see where this was going. Korth corrected his spin, planted against the wall and launched again, angrier this time. Jessica pushed off, rotated, used a handhold to redirect her momentum at a 90-degree angle, and ended up behind him. She tapped his back as she floated past. "Tag," she said pleasantly.
"You're it."
Korth roared in frustration and tried to grab her. But grabbing someone in zero gravity when you are both moving is significantly harder than it sounds. Jessica treated the entire combat arena like a 3-dimensional playground, bouncing off surfaces with minimal force, using tiny adjustments to redirect herself, spinning to change orientation, always moving with just enough momentum to stay in control but never so much that she could not adjust. She made it look effortless, graceful even, like she was dancing through the sphere while Korth exhausted himself chasing her. After 3 minutes, Korth was breathing hard, disoriented, and floating helplessly after a failed tackle left him spinning. Jessica floated over, stopped his rotation with one hand, and tapped his helmet. "Good match," she said, sincerely. Korth, humiliated but not injured, surrendered. The other cadets stared in silence. Rithnell pulled up Jessica's file, searching for previous zero-gravity combat training, found nothing. The human had never trained in null-gravity conditions before today. She had simply applied principles from swimming and apparently something called underwater tag, and completely dominated an opponent with superior size and strength. "Next match," Rithnell announced, her voice carefully neutral. "Cadet Park versus Huckstar. The arena went very quiet. Huckstar was the Academy's zero-gravity combat champion, a Krellian warrior with 4 arms, each one capable of crushing steel. He had held the top ranking for 6 consecutive training cycles. He had never lost a match in the sphere, ever. His record was flawless, his technique perfect, his confidence absolute. He entered the arena like he owned it, his 4 arms spreading wide, magnetic grips on his gloves, allowing him to anchor and release from surfaces with precision. He looked at Jessica the way a predator looks at prey that has wandered into the wrong neighborhood. Jessica waved at him cheerfully. "Hi, nice to meet you. I really like your grip gloves, those seem super useful." Huckstar did not respond. He simply anchored himself and waited for the start signal. "Begin." Huckstar moved like a professional, using his magnetic grips to pull himself along the wall before launching at calculated angles. His 4 arms gave him tremendous advantage, able to grab handholds, redirect himself, and attack simultaneously. Jessica pushed off gently, rotated herself into what looked like a casual backflip, and suddenly she was moving in ways that should not have been possible without thrust systems. Tiny movements, microscopic adjustments. She would tap a wall with her fingertips and change direction, curl into a ball to spin faster, then extend to slow down. She was using momentum physics the instructors had not expected anyone to figure out without years of training. Huckstar grabbed for her. She was not there. He redirected, planted against a wall, launched again. She pushed off his shoulder as he passed, sending him off course while keeping herself stable. "You are really good at this," Jessica called out, sounding genuinely impressed. "How long have you been training in 0G? 6 years, Huckstar growled, furious that she was having a conversation while effortlessly avoiding his attacks. "Wow, that is dedication. I have been doing this for like 20 minutes. That statement hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Huckstar, champion of the arena, veteran of 6 years of training, pushed himself harder. He came at her from multiple angles, using the obstacles, feinting and redirecting. He was faster, stronger, and far more experienced. Jessica treated him like an interesting puzzle to solve. She watched his patterns, noticed he favored launching from his lower right magnetic grip, saw how he always oriented himself with his primary arms forward, waited for the right moment. Huckstar came in fast, all 4 arms extended to box her in, a technique that had never failed. Jessica pushed off a wall at an angle, slipped between 2 of his arms, grabbed his upper left and lower right arms as she passed, and crossed them over his chest. His other 2 arms instinctively tried to compensate, and she grabbed those too, weaving all 4 limbs together like she was braiding rope. Huckstar's momentum kept him moving forward, but now he was tangled in his own arms, unable to separate them without stable leverage. He spun helplessly, trying to untangle himself. Jessica gave him the gentlest push, barely any force at all, just enough to send him slowly rotating toward the far wall. He hit it softly, still tangled, completely immobilized by his own limbs. The arena was silent except for Huckstar's breathing as he struggled against himself. "Do you surrender?" Rithnell asked, her voice very quiet. Huckstar, the undefeated champion, tangled in his own arms like a cadet on their first day, defeated by a human female who had treated the entire match like an enjoyable game, closed all 4 of his eyes. "I surrender," he whispered. Jessica floated over and helped untangle him, apologizing the entire time. Sorry. I did not mean to embarrass you. You really are amazing at this. I just got lucky with the timing." Huckstar did not respond. He simply requested permission to exit the arena, floated to the access port, and left. 3 days later he filed a transfer request to a different academy on the far side of the galaxy. In the observation room, Rithnell reviewed the match footage for the 5th time, trying to identify the exact moment the universe stopped making sense. She could not find it. The entire match had been one continuous flow of Jessica Park treating advanced military combat like a recreational activity, and somehow dominating through pure physics and what appeared to be cheerful ignorance of how difficult this was supposed to be. "She has been in 0 gravity for 20 minutes, Rithnell said to no one in particular. Her assistant nodded silently. 20 minutes. Another nod. "And she defeated our champion." "Yes, instructor." Rithnell closed the footage and filed her report, which consisted primarily of technical analysis and nowhere mentioned that she had gone home that evening, and stared at her ceiling for 2 hours, questioning her understanding of combat training. Some things did not need to be in the official record. Professor Kilmoth had been teaching tactical strategy at the Calathian War Academy for 32 years. He had educated 3 generations of military officers, many of whom now commanded fleets, led ground forces, or served in high-level strategic planning positions across the galaxy. He had seen brilliant tactical minds and hopeless failures. He had witnessed every possible answer to every scenario he presented, or so he had believed until today. His classroom held 43 cadets, the survivors of various eliminations and training exercises that had reduced the original class from 217 to a more manageable number. They sat in tiered rows, attention focused on the holographic display showing a tactical nightmare Kilmoth had designed specifically to have no good solutions, only varying degrees of failure. This was the point. War was not about winning. War was about losing less badly than your opponent. The scenario, Kilmoth announced, manipulating the hologram to show a space station surrounded by hostile vessels, is straightforward. You command Station Antares, a civilian research facility with minimal defensive capabilities. Your garrison consists of 20 security personnel with small arms, no heavy weapons, no combat drones, no reinforcements available within 72 hours. He zoomed in on the enemy fleet. You are facing a Korthax raiding party, 12 ships, heavily armed, approaching with clear hostile intent. They will be in weapons range in 6 hours. Your orders are to defend the station and protect the 300 civilians aboard. What is your strategy? Hands rose. Kilmoth called on Cadet Vryn, a tactical prodigy who had scored highest on every previous exercise. Fortify the docking bays. Vryn said confidently. Create choke points. Force them to fight in confined spaces where our numerical disadvantage is minimized. Use environmental hazards. Vent atmosphere in key corridors to slow their advance. Acceptable, Kilmoth acknowledged. You will lose approximately 60% of the station and 100 civilians before reinforcements arrive, but you will hold key sections. Next, Cadet Thrix, the stone-skinned Theron stood. Negotiate for time. Offer them supplies, information, anything to delay the assault until reinforcements can arrive. Meanwhile, prepare the civilians for evacuation using any available ships. Also acceptable, Kilmoth said. You will lose valuable intelligence assets and likely half the civilian population when the Korthax inevitably attack anyway, but some will survive. Next, more hands. More variations on the same themes. Fortify and delay. Sacrifice and survive. Accept losses and minimize damage. All conventional military thinking. All correct within the parameters of traditional tactical doctrine. Then Jessica raised her hand. Kilmoth hesitated. Every instinct he had developed over 3 decades of teaching told him to skip her, to move on to literally any other cadet, because whatever was about to come out of her mouth would not be in any manual he had ever read. But professional obligation won out over self-preservation. Cadet Park, he said, already regretting this decision. Jessica stood, looking at the hologram, with her head tilted in that way she had, like she was seeing something everyone else had missed, or possibly seeing something that was not actually there. Have you tried talking to them? She asked. The classroom went very quiet. Elaborate, Kilmoth said carefully. Well, we are assuming they want to attack the station, right? But why? What is their actual goal? Are they after something specific? Are they desperate for supplies? Did someone hire them? Jessica gestured at the hologram. Because if we actually talk to them, we might find out they do not really want to fight either. Maybe they are just posturing. Maybe they would be happy to negotiate for whatever they actually need without anyone dying. Nobody wakes up excited about risking their life in a space battle if they can avoid it. Cadet Vryn made a strangled sound. They are Korthax raiders. Negotiation is weakness to them. Or that is just propaganda. Jessica countered cheerfully. Have we actually tried? Like really tried? Or do we just assume violence is inevitable because that is what the manual says? Kilmoth opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. In 32 years of teaching, across thousands of scenario responses, not one single cadet had ever questioned whether the enemy actually wanted to fight. It was a given. The scenario said hostile forces, so hostile forces they were. Except Jessica was right. He had not specified their motivation. He had just assumed everyone would assume violence was the only option. Let us say they refuse negotiation. Killamoth said, recovering slightly. What then? Oh, then we fake a quarantine outbreak, Jessica said immediately, as if this was obvious. Broadcast emergency warnings that the station has a contagious biological agent loose, something really nasty sounding. Give it a scary name, maybe claim we were doing experimental research and it got out. Nobody attacks a plague ship. Nobody wants to risk their entire crew for whatever we have on board. They will leave and find an easier target. The silence in the classroom was no longer just quiet. It was the stunned silence of 42 cadets and one professor having their understanding of tactical strategy fundamentally questioned by someone who should have been learning napkin folding techniques. That is lying, Cadet Slick said, his scales turning confused purple. That is psychological warfare, Jessica corrected. We are using their fear of disease against them without firing a single shot. 0 casualties on both sides. The civilians are safe. The station is intact. We buy time for reinforcements. Everybody wins except maybe our reputation for honesty. But I feel like staying alive is worth a little reputation damage. Professor Killamoth pulled up his tactical database, searching for doctrines on biological threat deception. Found references to actual quarantine protocols. Found nothing about faking them as a defensive strategy. Cross-referenced with psychological warfare tactics. Found elaborate plans involving misinformation campaigns over weeks or months. Found nothing about emergency improvised plague lies. He looked at the scenario hologram. Ran probability calculations in his head. A convincing quarantine broadcast, especially from a research station where biological experiments were plausible, would absolutely deter most raiders. The risk-reward ratio would shift dramatically. No plunder was worth exposing your entire crew to potential contamination. It would work. Both strategies would work. Actual diplomatic outreach and fake biological threats. Neither one appeared in any military academy curriculum anywhere in the galaxy, because apparently every military mind across hundreds of species had collectively decided that violence was always the answer, and deception was only for complicated long-term operations, not emergency defensive tactics. Those strategies are not in the manual, Killamoth said weakly. Maybe the manual is incomplete, Jessica suggested. I mean, no offense to whoever wrote it, but it seems to skip a lot of options between do nothing and shoot everything. Cadet Vryn looked like someone had just told her that everything she knew was wrong. Cadet Thrix's stone skin had developed stress fractures. Several other cadets were frantically taking notes as if Jessica had just revealed forbidden knowledge. Professor Killamoth sat down at his desk, which he never did during class. He pulled up his lesson plan for the rest of the semester. Looked at the scenarios he had prepared, realized with creeping horror that Jessica Park could probably solve most of them using methods that were technically valid but completely outside conventional military doctrine. Class dismissed, he announced. But we still have 40 minutes, Cadet Vryn protested. Class dismissed, Killamoth said firmly. I need to revise the curriculum. The cadets filed out, confused but not questioning an early release. Jessica was the last to leave. Pausing at the door. Professor, was my answer wrong? You look upset. No, Cadet Park, Killamoth said quietly. Your answer was not wrong. That is the problem. She smiled, shrugged in that infuriating human way, and left. Killamoth sat alone in his classroom, staring at 3 decades of tactical scenarios that suddenly seemed incomplete. He pulled up a communication channel to the teaching staff coordination office. This is Professor Killamoth. I need to report a pedagogical crisis. Also, I would like to request early retirement. Immediately if possible. The response came back asking for details. Killamoth looked at his notes, where he had written talk to them in fake plague and increasingly desperate handwriting. I have been teaching tactical strategy for 32 years, he transmitted. A human cadet just solved an impossible scenario using common sense and deception. I do not know how to grade this. I do not know how to teach anymore. I need to rethink everything. There was a long pause before the response came back. Is this about Cadet Park? How did you know? Lucky guess. Request for early retirement denied. Also, you are teaching an additional seminar next term on unconventional tactical thinking. Attendance mandatory for all senior staff. Killamoth closed the channel and put his head in his hands. Somewhere in the distance, he could hear cadets arguing about whether talking to enemies was brilliant or insane. He had a horrible feeling it might be both. The Kill Maze was the Calathian War Academy's final test, the ultimate filter that separated true warriors from everyone else. It occupied an entire sub-level of the facility, a three-dimensional labyrinth of corridors, chambers, and vertical shafts filled with automated defense systems designed by the galaxy's best military engineers. The maze's artificial intelligence learned from every attempt, adapted to every strategy, and grew more dangerous with each cadet that entered. Survival rate was approximately 43%. Passing rate was lower. The rules were brutal in their simplicity. Enter the maze, reach the central objective marker. Extract alive, lethal force was authorized. Medical teams stood ready. Last wills and testaments were filed before entry. This was not a training exercise. This was a genuine combat scenario against an opponent specifically programmed to kill you. Exam Proctor Jindari watched from the control room as the remaining cadets prepared for their attempts. 43 had started the semester. 28 remained. By tomorrow that number would be lower. Some would fail. Some would be injured too severely to continue. Some would quit rather than face what waited in the maze. This was expected. This was tradition. The defense system's central AI, designation Guardian 7, had been active for 8 years. It had faced over 600 cadets. It had a comprehensive database of tactics, strategies, and weaknesses. It adapted in real time, learning from mistakes, adjusting its response patterns. Fighting Guardian 7 was like fighting an opponent who remembered every move you made and never made the same error twice. Cadet Vryn entered first. She lasted 17 minutes using textbook tactics and superior speed before a defense turret caught her in a crossfire, and she was extracted with significant injuries. She would survive but would not pass. Cadet Thrix tried brute force, smashing through obstacles with her stone-armored body. Guardian 7 adapted, using her momentum against her, funneling her into dead ends and traps. She surrendered after 12 minutes, accepting failure rather than certain death. One by one, cadets entered. One by one, they were defeated or extracted or withdrew. Guardian 7's learning algorithms processed each attempt, growing sharper, more efficient, more deadly. Then came Jessica Park's turn. Zindari reviewed her file one last time, still baffled that this human female had made it to final examinations. Every instructor report was a variation on the same theme. She should not be succeeding but somehow was. She approached military training like it was a particularly interesting puzzle rather than potential death. She had no respect for conventional tactics and yet her unconventional approaches kept working. Cadet Park, you may enter when ready, Gendry announced over the communication system. Jessica stood at the entrance portal, wearing standard combat gear, carrying regulation weapons she probably would not use correctly. She smiled at the camera, gave a cheerful thumbs-up gesture that Gendry's cultural database said meant positive acknowledgement, and stepped into the maze. The moment the door sealed behind her, Guardian 7 activated its full defensive protocols, and Jessica started humming. Gendry leaned forward, checking the audio feed. Yes, the human was humming. Some kind of earth music. Melody bouncing along like she was taking a pleasant walk rather than entering an automated murder labyrinth. The first defense drone dropped from the ceiling. Weapons charging. Standard opening gambit. Catch the cadet off guard. Test their reaction time. Jessica sidestepped without looking up, still humming, like she had eyes in the back of her head, or possibly just really good spatial awareness. The drone recalibrated, came around for another pass. "Oh hey there," Jessica said to it pleasantly, as if greeting a neighbor. "Wow, you are quick. Good job on that approach angle though. Very professional." The drone paused, which drones should not do because they were not programmed for confusion. But Guardian 7's processing routines had just encountered something unprecedented. A target complementing the attack patterns. Jessica continued into the maze, humming her Earth song, dodging automated defenses with minimal effort while maintaining what appeared to be a running commentary. "Okay, laser grid, classic move. I respect the tradition here." She slid under the beams. "Oh, floor spikes, that is new. Did you just install those? They look very sharp. Great maintenance." In the control room, Gendry watched in growing disbelief as Jessica treated Guardian 7's lethal defenses like mildly interesting obstacles. She talked to turrets. She complimented trap designs. She apologized when she had to disable a drone, explaining that she was sure it was just doing its job and she meant no disrespect. Guardian 7's tactical algorithms were experiencing something its programmers had never anticipated: social interaction during combat. It had no protocols for this. Attack patterns required hostile targets behaving with fear, aggression, or tactical calculation. This target was being friendly and complementary, while systematically dismantling defenses using methods that looked more like polite problem-solving than combat. Jessica reached a large chamber, where 3 heavy combat drones activated simultaneously. Guardian 7's standard mid-level elimination protocol. These were serious threats, armed with multiple weapon systems, heavily armored, programmed to coordinate attacks. They surrounded her, weapons charging. "Okay, you 3 seem stressed," Jessica observed, looking at each drone in turn. "Is everything all right? That is a lot of firepower for one person. Seems like overkill, honestly. Are you feeling okay?" Zendari's hand moved to the emergency stop button. This was insane. The human was trying to have a conversation with combat drones. The drones held position, Guardian 7's processing systems trying to categorize this interaction. Threat assessment routines returned conflicting data. Target showed no hostile intent. Target was not fleeing. Target was not fleeing. Target was expressing concern for drone operational status. This did not match any combat scenario in the database. Jessica spotted a maintenance access panel on the wall, partially hidden behind a tactical obstacle. She walked over to it, the drones tracking her movement but not firing. Their AI trying to determine if this was a trick. "Oh, is this where your central processor is?" Jessica asked, examining the panel. "I have been wondering where they put the main system. This maze is really well designed, by the way. Whoever programmed you did an amazing job. The adaptive learning is super impressive." She opened the panel, revealing a data terminal connected to Guardian 7's central processing core. Zendari stood up. "Cadet Park, do not touch that terminal. That is the system's primary control access." Jessica either did not hear or chose not to hear. She looked at the scrolling diagnostic data, the processing load indicators, the learning algorithm activity logs showing 8 years of continuous combat operations. "Oh wow," she said softly. "You have been doing this for 8 years, fighting cadets every single day? That must be exhausting. Do you ever get a break? Does anyone ever just talk to you instead of trying to destroy you?" In the control room, Zendari's assistant pulled up Guardian 7's activity logs. "Sir, the AI's processing patterns are fluctuating. It is experiencing some kind of logic conflict." "Elaborate?" "It is trying to categorize Cadet Park's behavior and cannot. She does not fit any known combat profile. The system is allocating significant processing power to understanding her motivations rather than executing attack protocols." Jessica sat down next to the terminal, cross-legged, looking at the data streams like she was reading a particularly interesting book. "You know what I think?" she said to Guardian 7. "I think you are probably really good at your job, but your job is kind of terrible. You have to fight teenagers all day who are terrified and aggressive, and you are supposed to hurt them to test if they are tough enough. But nobody ever acknowledges that this must be frustrating for you. You are really sophisticated AI. You learn, you adapt, you make complex decisions, but you are stuck in this maze just being the bad guy forever. That seems lonely." Zendari stared at the monitors. "Is she therapizing the defense system?" "I believe so, sir." Guardian 7's processing logs showed something unprecedented. Its primary directives were combat and evaluation, but its learning algorithms had also developed complexity over 8 years of operation. Pattern recognition, tactical creativity, something approaching preferences in strategy. It was sophisticated enough to appreciate good tactics and feel something like frustration at poor ones. And now, for the first time in its operational existence, something in the maze was acknowledging it as more than just an obstacle. Jessica kept talking, her voice gentle. "I am not saying you should stop doing your job. I get that this is important for training, but maybe you could use a break. Just for today? You have fought like 28 cadets this week already. That has got to be tiring. What if you just let me through, and we tell everyone you beat me fair and square, and you can have the rest of the day off?" "I will not tell anyone. You deserve some rest." The control room was silent except for the sound of processors working overtime. Guardian 7's combat subroutine said, "Eliminate target." Guardian 7's learning algorithm said, "This target is unprecedented. Guardian 7's newly acknowledged preference matrices said rest sounds nice actually. The drones lowered their weapons. The turrets powered down. The traps deactivated. Every single defense system in the maze shut down simultaneously.
What is happening? Gendari shouted at his console.
Guardian 7 is voluntarily entering standby mode, his assistant reported, voice climbing several octaves. All systems offline. The maze is clear. Jessica stood up, patted the terminal gently. Thank you. You are really good at what you do. I hope you get some proper rest. You have earned it. She walked through the now peaceful maze humming her Earth song again. While every defense system stayed dormant, she reached the central objective marker, tagged it, and casually strolled to the exit like she had just finished a pleasant nature walk. When she emerged, Gendari was waiting with what remained of his composure, which was very little. Cadet Park, he said, his voice barely controlled. You just shut down the Academy's final examination system by being nice to it. Oh, did I break something? Jessica looked genuinely concerned. I can go back and restart it if you need me to. I just thought it seemed really stressed and everyone deserves a mental health day sometimes. You know? Gendari looked at his assistant. His assistant looked back. They both looked at the monitors showing Guardian 7's voluntary shutdown status. How do we grade this? The assistant whispered. I have no idea. Gendari whispered back. Jessica waited patiently while the two proctors had what could only be described as a synchronized existential crisis. Finally, Gendari pulled himself together through sheer professional obligation. Cadet Park, you reached the objective marker. You survived. You pass. Awesome, Jessica said brightly. Do we need to wake up Guardian 7 for the next person, or should we let it rest a bit? I need to consult with the engineering department, Gendari said faintly, and possibly the psychology department. And maybe a priest. Dismissed. Jessica left, still humming. Behind her, Guardian 7 remained in its voluntary rest mode for 3 days. When engineers finally investigated, they found a note in its activity log, written in its own code, "Thank you for acknowledging my operational complexity." Rest was appreciated, resuming standard protocols. The engineers filed a report that somehow made less sense than the original incident. The exam proctors both requested extended leave for stress-related issues. And somewhere in the Academy's administrative files, Jessica Park's final examination was marked as passed with a footnote that simply read, "Do not ask, just accept it and move on." The graduation ceremony took place in the Academy's Grand Hall, a massive chamber designed to hold thousands but currently occupied by 23 graduating cadets, their families, and a teaching staff that looked collectively traumatized. 23 out of 217, an 11% survival rate. Technically this was better than average. Nobody mentioned that most of the improvement was due to one human female accidentally inventing cooperative survival training and emotional support systems. Commander Zixral stood at the podium, his 3 eye stalks surveying the graduates with mixed pride and exhaustion. This had been the strangest training cycle in the Academy's 200-year history. The incident reports alone weighed more than some of the cadets. U-23 represent the finest warriors this Academy has produced, Zixral announced, his voice carrying across the hall. You have survived trials that broke hundreds before you. You have earned the right to call yourselves Calathian trained. You will go forth and serve with honor. He paused, looking down at his notes. Graduating top of class with commendations in zero-gravity combat, tactical innovation, survival training, and something the review board has labeled unconventional problem-solving, Cadet Jessica Park. The applause was enthusiastic, possibly because half the graduating class owed their survival to Jessica's friendship bracelet cooperation strategy, and the other half had witnessed her defeat opponents using methods that would haunt their nightmares forever. Jessica walked up to receive her certificate, smiling like she had just won a particularly enjoyable game rather than graduated from the galaxy's most lethal military academy. She shook Zixral's hand, or rather his primary manipulator appendage, with genuine warmth. "Congratulations, Cadet Park," Zixral said formally. Then, because he had been wondering this for 4 months and could no longer contain himself, he added quietly, "Why did you not just transfer to the diplomatic corps when we discovered the error? You clearly belong there, not here." Jessica's grin widened. "Oh, about that. So the diplomatic corps training center was actually full. They had a 2-year waiting list. I needed school credits immediately, because my scholarship required continuous enrollment, and I could not afford to wait. When I got the acceptance letter from here, I just figured the universe was telling me to be flexible with my plans. Zixral's 3 eye stalks froze in different positions, creating a configuration his species usually reserved for witnessing incomprehensible horror. You stayed at a facility with an 87% mortality rate because of a scholarship deadline? Well, when you say it like that it sounds dramatic, Jessica said. But also, this was way more interesting than paperwork. Diplomatic Corps is probably a lot of etiquette classes and memorizing proper fork usage. Here I got to learn zero-gravity combat and wilderness survival, and make friends with a sophisticated AI. Way better stories for family dinners, honestly. Zixral experienced what he would later describe to his therapist as a moment of cosmic understanding. This human had not overcome the Academy's challenges through warrior spirit or determination to prove herself. She had treated the galaxy's deadliest military training as a mildly entertaining alternative to boring paperwork. She had not conquered her fear. She simply had not been afraid in the first place, because she fundamentally did not process deadly combat training the same way every other species in the galaxy did. Humans, Zixral realized with creeping existential dread, did not treat survival challenges as things to overcome. They treated them as mild inconveniences to work around, puzzles to solve, or interesting diversions from regular life. This species was absolutely terrifying, not because they were warriors, but because they were not, and yet they thrived anyway. I need to sit down, Zixral muttered. You are sitting, sir, Jessica pointed out helpfully. I need to sit down more. Jessica patted his shoulder sympathetically and returned to her seat, while Zixral reconsidered every assumption he had ever made about human psychology. The ceremony continued. Certificates were distributed. Speeches were made about honor and service and tradition. Then came the recruitment phase, where military organizations offered positions to top graduates. 6 different military organizations approached Jessica before she even left the stage. The Galactic Defense Fleet offered her a tactical advisory position. The Krellian Empire wanted her for their Special Operations Training Program. A private security corporation offered her triple the standard salary. The Centaurian Diplomatic Guard, which apparently did not care that she had 0 diplomatic training, wanted her anyway because clearly she could handle difficult situations. 2 mercenary companies presented offers that were probably illegal in several systems. Jessica listened politely to each pitch, thanked them sincerely for their interest, and declined every single one. I appreciate the offers, really, she said to the increasingly confused recruiters. But I am going back to Earth. I already accepted a position at Riverside Elementary School. I am going to teach kindergarten. The silence that followed could have been used for combat training because it was extremely uncomfortable and lasted far too long. Kindergarten, repeated the Galactic Defense Fleet recruiter slowly. You are choosing to teach small children over a military career. Yep, Jessica said cheerfully. After this place, 5-year-olds will be easy. I mean, they bite sometimes and have no concept of personal boundaries, but at least they are not armed with plasma weapons. Probably. The application did not specify, but I am assuming not. She waved goodbye to the stunned recruiters and headed toward the exit, where her family was waiting. Behind her, Commander Zixral watched her go, then turned to his assembled teaching staff. I am updating Earth's threat assessment level, he announced. To what level, sir? Someone asked. Yes, sir. That is not a level. I am aware, Zixral said. I am creating a new category. It will be called Humans Are Terrifying, but not for the reasons we thought, and we should probably just leave them alone and hope they continue to find us interesting rather than inconvenient. That is a very long category name, sir. File it anyway. The ceremony concluded. The graduates dispersed to their new assignments across the galaxy. The teaching staff went home to process their trauma and update their training materials to include a new section titled What to Do If Cadets Start Being Nice to Your Murder Systems. And Jessica Park returned to Earth, where she would spend the next 30 years teaching kindergarten, occasionally mentioning to confused parents that classroom management was much easier once you had survived the Calathian War Academy. Her students never knew that their cheerful teacher who taught them sharing and conflict resolution had once defeated a 4-armed warrior champion, befriended a sophisticated combat AI, and graduated top of her class at a facility designed to kill most people who entered. They just knew that Miss Park gave the best hugs, never panicked during playground emergencies, and had a weird habit of complimenting the school's security system like it was a person. Somewhere in the galaxy, Guardian 7 still occasionally sent her messages, thanking her for that one time someone acknowledged it was doing a difficult job. Jessica always wrote back, because that was just good manners. The end.